The senator from Oklahoma.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that I be recognized as in morning business for up to 15 minutes.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. As you know, the Senate will take up a vote this week on the CRA that I have offered concerning Utility MAC. Utility MAC is a requirement. MAC, of course, M-A-C-T means Maximum Achievable Control Technology. And one of the problems we're having with the overregulation that we have on a lot of these emissions is that there is no technology to accommodate this. Well, in the case of Utility MAC, I think everyone understands now, this is an effort to kill coal. And I know there are a lot of reasons people have on this, but recently some things have happened, and I thought I would mention that as we look toward this vote, it looks like it's going to be on Wednesday. Looks like it's going to be some speaking time on Tuesday, and on Wednesday then we'll actually have the vote. As we all know, a CRA is an effort for the elected officials to reflect upon the overregulations and to stop a regulation. I mean, after all, we're the ones who are accountable to the people and not the Environmental Protection Agency. The breaking news is that President Obama just issued a statement this afternoon that he will veto my resolution if it passes. Just before that announcement from the White House this afternoon, Representatives Ed Markey and Henry Waxman came out fighting with a new report detailing what Representative Waxman has called the most anti-environmental House of Representatives in history. I'd like to remind my Democrat friends that 19 House Democrats supported the companion legislation in the House, the same thing that we'll be voting on here. The Democrats and a lot of the many of the labor unions have sent letters in support of my resolution, so it's not just Republicans whose constituents are feeling the pain of the EPA's regulations. Now, to my Democrat friends in the House, I beg to differ. It's not that this Congress is anti-environmental, it's that the EPA is the most radical EPA in history, aggressive to the point that even the left-leaning Washington Post has called out the agency for, quote, earning a reputation for abuse. Of course, this is the same EPA whose top officials have told us that they are out to crucify the American energy producers. We all remember that. The sixth area of the EPA, Armendariz, came out and made this statement to some of his subordinates that we need to do the same thing that the Romans did back, you remember that, they did back in the old days when they'd go around the Mediterranean and they'd go into the towns in Turkey and they'd crucify the first 5 people that they would see, and that gets them under their control. And he said that's the same thing. That's what we have to do. That's going to be our operation. Well, we went through that, and of course he's no longer there. Over the course of President Obama's presidency, whatever they could achieve through legislation, they've tried to achieve through aggressive, onerous EPA regulations. They tried, first of all, to do it through legislation. Remember cap-and-trade legislation? They tried for 10 years to get that done. Finally, each year they brought it up. There more and more people in this body, the United States Senate, were opposed to a cap-and-trade system to do away with greenhouse gases and to put regulations on them. Well, every time a vote comes up, there's a larger majority opposed to it because the people of this country are concerned about the economy and the fact that this would be a very costly thing. It was Obama that made President Obama said with the cap-and-trade regulations, it would be very, very, very expensive. Now, when they couldn't pass the Clean Water Restoration Act, the same thing happened. Remember, that was introduced by Senator Feingold from Wisconsin and by Representative Oberstar in the House. And they not only did they defeat overwhelmingly the Clean Water Restoration Act, but the 2 individuals who were the sponsors in the House and the Senate were both defeated in the next election. So just how radical is President Obama on environmental issues? By imposing these backdoor global warming cap-and-trade regulations through the EPA, President Obama is fulfilling his campaign promise that energy prices would necessarily skyrocket, his words, by vetoing the Keystone Pipeline. He gave the far left what one of his supporters called the biggest global warming victory in years by finalizing the most expensive EPA rule in history he is making good on his campaign promise that if anybody wants to build a coal-fired power plant, they can. It's just that it will bankrupt him. And he succeeded in throwing hundreds of millions of taxpayers' dollars out the window on companies like Solyndra, which he said would lead us to a brighter and more prosperous future. But President Obama is not running on this record of accomplishment. Why? Because Americans are worse off, not better off for it. They are out of work, they're struggling to make ends meet, and under the pain of regulations that cause their energy prices to skyrocket. So he's running as far away from that radical record as possible. So what are we trying to do in the Senate by stopping Utility MAC? Is to prevent the president from achieving under another aspect of his radical global warming agenda, and hopefully restore some sanity and balance to this out-of-control regulatory regime. I think everyone in this body can agree that we all share a commitment for improving air quality, but it should be done in a way that doesn't harm jobs and the economy and cause electricity prices to skyrocket on every American, or do away with one of the most reliable, abundant, affordable energy resources, coal. You've got to keep in mind that right now, in order to run this machine called America, 50% of that is actually being done on coal. Now, I'd like to address the public health debate, which has long been the excuse for those in this administration who simply want to kill coal. It was certainly the excuse President Obama used today to defend his decision to veto my resolution. Let's be clear about one thing. One thing from the offset. If the effort behind Utility MAC were really about public health, then my Democrat colleagues would have joined our efforts way back in 2005 and passed the Clear Skies bill, a bill that would have put a plan in place to achieve a 70% reduction in mercury emissions. But they didn't. And we all remember why. We remember that they wanted to include in this bill that covered SOx, NOx, and mercury, the real pollutants, a mandatory 70% reduction. And they said, well, you can't do it because you don't also have CO2, anthropogenic gases that are covered by this bill. So it was held hostage, and consequently, we weren't able to get it passed. I can remember that President Obama said, this is a quote, he said, I voted against the Clear Skies bill, quote, I voted against the Clear Skies bill. In fact, I was the deciding vote despite the fact that I'm a coal state and that half of my state thought I'd thoroughly betrayed them because I thought clean air was critical and global warming was critical, unquote. At that Environment and Public Works hearing in April of this year, Senator Barrasso asked Brenda Archambault of the National Wildlife Federation if the American people would have been better off if the Senate had passed the Clear Skies bill back in 2005. And her answer was absolutely. Of course, the National Wildlife Federation was not happy with it, that we were calling attention to Ms. Archambault's admission, so over the weekend they accused my staff of twisting her words. My staff did nothing of the sort. Not only did Ms. Archambault say that mercury reductions in 2005 would absolutely have made Americans better off, she reiterated that same point later when Senator Barrasso asked her again, quote, it would have been better if they had done it in 2005, Ms. Archambault replied, sure. The entire exchange from the hearing has been posted on our EPW website for anyone who wants to see exactly what was said. And I don't think it gets any clearer than that. Common sense reductions earlier would have made us better off. That was 2005. That we would have had these reductions, mandatory reductions, in a very short period of time, and that time is more than 50% expired at this time. In the National Wildlife Federation blog accusing me of twisting Ms. Archambault's words, the author says, quote, an odd part of Senator Inhofe's attack, he's essentially saying a 70% reduction in mercury emissions would have been just dandy, but the 91% reduction proposed by the EPA would destroy the economy. Is that really such a huge difference, or is he just playing politics with public health? That's a good question. What is the difference between the Clear Skies and the Utility MAC, it's very simple. Clear Skies would have reduced emissions dramatically by 70%. Now, we're talking about reducing emissions on SOx, NOx, and mercury. But it would have done it without threatening to kill coal and the millions of jobs that coal sustains. On the other hand, Utility MAC is specifically designed to kill coal. It makes no effort whatsoever to balance environmental protection and economic growth. Now, who's playing politics with public health? If public health were really the priority, why did President Obama and his fellow Democrats vote against a 70% reduction way back in 2005? Now, what is this effort really about? It's about one thing: killing coal. And killing coal is the centerpiece of their radical global warming agenda. Remember then, Senator Obama said that he voted against the health benefits in Clear Skies because he thought, quote, a global warming was critical. In other words, global warming was more important than any of the considerations regarding health. And these are real pollutants: SOx, NOx, and mercury. Importantly, the Senate will take this vote on my resolution just as the world leaders are gathering in Rio de Janeiro. Right now, they're down there gathering at the Rio Plus 20 Sustainable Development Conference. Now, let's remember what happened 20 years ago, 1992. That was the conference in Rio where they all got together and they were going to be doing all these things on anthropogenic gases and all of that. Well, President Obama, who is now busy pretending to be a fossil fuel president to garner votes, will not be attending. But he is sending his green team to negotiate on his behalf. What is this conference really about? As Fox News reported back in April, quote, the main goal of the much-touted Rio Plus 20 United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development is to make dramatic and enormously expensive changes in a way that the world does nearly everything, or as one of the documents put it, a fundamental shift in the way we think and act. Utility MAC is a huge part of this effort to change the way we live and to spread the wealth around. And that's what they're talking about down there. We start invoking a new tax system. It was Secretary General of the UN, Ban Ki-moon. He proposes how sustainable development changes can and must be addressed. He included, now I'm quoting him, more than a $2.1 trillion a year in wealth transfers from rich countries to poorer countries in the name of fostering green infrastructure, climate adaptation, and other green economy measures. He's advocating new carbon taxes. That's on us, of industrialized countries that could cost about $250 billion a year, or a 0.6% of gross domestic product by 2020. Other environmental taxes are mentioned but not specified. Further unspecified price hikes that extend beyond fossil fuels to anything derived from agriculture, fisheries, forestry, or other kinds of land and water use, all of which would be radically reorganized. These changes would contribute to a more level playing field between the established and the brown technologies and newer, greener ones. He advocated major global social spending programs, including a social protection floor and social safety nets for the world's most vulnerable and social groups. What it's all talking about more higher taxes on the developed world to go to the beneficiary of the undeveloped world. This is the same thing they were talking about 20 years ago. So I think that it's very timely that this is happening today. It's happening at the very moment that we'll be voting on Wednesday as to whether or not to kill coal. And by the way, this is the only vote that will be taken this year, or probably ever, to ultimately kill coal. Once this is passed, then of course the contracts all are broken, and we have to figure out what are we going to do in this country if you kill coal. How do you run this machine called America? And the answer to that question is you can't do it. So it's very, very important, and I don't think there's any doubt in anyone's mind that the real purpose for the vote that will take place on Wednesday is going to be to kill coal in America. America can't provide the necessary energy to run its machine and be competitive without coal. So it's a critical vote, and it's one that I think people are aware of that is going to be taking place. With that, I yield the floor.